It's Wednesday. Let's chat. I'm Kanan Chandran, the publisher of stormasia.com, and this is our regular series of discussions, the Wednesday Web Chat, the WED WEB CHAT. I know many people are out on trips. They've gone out with a vengeance, and it's school holidays as well, right? So I've got my travel shirt on, my holiday shirt, largely because today's discussion is about the future of demand. You've had the pandemic, which affected a lot of people, a lot of businesses and a lot of people. And now that you're coming out of that, you're seeing a surge in different sort of activities. So the future of demand is something that will prevail as a sub-series within the WED WEB Chat discussions. And what we'd like to do is bring in different industries to share their experiences of dealing with the changes that they've had to take on board as a result of the pandemic and how they are projecting for the future needs of their industry. So matching the supply and demand, which is quite interesting and quite difficult and quite complex, I would think, given that we've had the pandemic, we've got a war going on in Ukraine, we've got rising costs, a lot of uncertainty, we don't know what's coming next. So how do you plan ahead? So we've got today somebody from the travel industry and somebody from the software industry, and they kind of come from different ends of the pendulum swing, the pandemic pendulum swing. Travel ground to a halt, so you couldn't do anything, and now it's revenge travel. And when the pandemic kicked in, everybody was working from home, and there was a surge in software needs, and so applications for that have continued, and people still like the idea of working from home. So we've got Brent Anderson, the regional manager, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Middle East of Tourism Australia. And we've got Chia Chin Koo, who's the regional marketing manager of services as a software company, Zoho Corporation. So let me start with Koo. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, about Zoho, and what you've been doing very quickly?
Sure. Thank you, Kana, for the introduction. So I'm Koo, the regional marketing manager for Zoho Corp. Basically, right now I'm like flying around in Southeast Asia, where I conduct a lot of events and also meet our customers and also to promote our software as a service to the business communities in the APAC.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Let's hear a bit about what you've been up to.
I think for us, it was contingency plan after contingency plan. So we're just trying to see, right now we're working out if we're any good at them, because you're only as good until you activate those plans. But it was very much keeping a finger on consumer demand, consumer trends, and just getting people to think about, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we said, oh, we'll see you shortly. And then we switched to more an entertainment and a dreaming kind of demand generation program. Plus we had our supply side that we needed to make sure was going to get ready from everywhere, from our distribution partners such as travel agents and OTAs to airlines, and even our immigration bodies, etc. So we were going to be able to get that surge of pent-up demand.
Okay, so the past 2 years, the pandemic years, the pandemic is still on. So the years where we were locked down and we were restrained in terms of what we could do, the constraints. What exactly did you have as a strategy to when you were going to come out of it? Did you have to deal with new vendors, new partners? Did you, in the meantime, find opportunities to find new locations, perhaps, to shout out about?
From our point of view, we were really worried about what the impact would be on the supply side. So a lot of operators went to the wall. Others were dipping into their retirement. We also saw a lot of people leave the international focus side of our industry and pivot towards domestic. So it was how we actually supported that maintenance and sustenance of the industry, so that when we did open, we actually had a good product to offer. You're seeing it around the world, service standards and hotels only opening 80% of their rooms because they can't get enough staff back into the industry. So these are big supply side issues that we had to look at. We also really focused on what was the consumer changing pattern, because we all changed. We were having a discussion before about work from home and the pluses and minuses from an employer to an employer, but also how we would be ready. And we set ourselves a goal even though we're government, we knew we'd probably get an announcement with like 3 days notice. We saw it with the New Zealand bubble for Australia case that borders would open. So how did we get ready to launch as fast as possible? The other one was just our partners. We've invested millions in our airline partnerships, our trade partnerships. So how do we support them? So we changed our whole funding model. Normally, we ask our partners to match dollar for dollar, and we realised as a government agency, we could add value by saying, hey, there's money to launch as soon as you go. So it was just looking at all of those stages of how we drive demand, how we keep in touch with the consumer. We have a big consumer demand project, which is the name of our global research, and what were those changing trends we were seeing in consumer attitudes and behaviours, and what did Australia have to satisfy that demand, and then how could we put in front of the consumers through our partners when we launched.
So Zoho runs on Zoho, so including our like a communication apps and our like meeting tools, such as like Zoho Meetings and Zoho Click, that kind of internal messaging app, where we still get to meet and have our calls. So on day one, when the day between pandemic and work from home, there was a very little to no transition. So communication is good, and when communication is good within a company or an organization, or maybe a large one like Zoho, it doesn't stop impact decision making. So decision making is very important for like our CEOs to tell every staff that, hey, the pandemic is here, the COVID is a real problem, and how we intend to tackle this problem as an organization. So I would say day one, our CEO and our company culture and principles allow us to maintain communications within the organization. So it actually gave a lot of employees a kind of like a safety net. You feel safe that the company is not suddenly not contacting me for a few days. Will I keep my job? Will I be able to carry on with the company? Sort of. Yeah.
I understand you also offered some of your services free, right, for a while. Zoho One.
Yes. So there was a time, we saw that there's when companies when the economy or when the climate is actually being affected by the COVID, the small and medium businesses are the first to suffer, because as when F&B, I think we know it in Singapore, the F&B who transited late when they trying to find some food platforms to delivery platforms to send out food, and within that interim of 1 month time for them to get the approval, what are they going to survive on? So we also felt that hey, it's good that as a company we should probably help them in their subscription.
You were talking about the trends, right? Did you see any quite obvious shifts in behavior and patterns which could prevail, which could carry on after things have opened up fully?
Yeah, we did. In terms of the first couple of months, it was just everyone was going, this is unrealistic. They must be opening up soon. So we're in that almost ready, set kind of position, if you think of a running race, but we were sitting in that set position for quite a while. And I think to Ku's comments, our staff started burning out. So we very quickly my number one goal was, how do I protect my team? And I was very, very clear about that. So I tightened up a bit of the internal comms, etc. But in terms of the consumer shift, there was that pent up demand. I was planning a trip. I've got these vouchers for an airline, etc. So we went through every part of our business, and as consumers ourselves said, what would we like to see? Someone helping us satisfy this demand, or give me a reason to convert my voucher back to that destination or other destinations that may not be open. In terms of the research, what we saw was a much bigger focus, started quite early on ecotourism and sustainability. It was a real consumer shift, and it started for me, I think, noticing dolphins were back in Venice because the tourists were gone, and the canals of Venice, and those kind of stories started coming to light. And if you think of the media who normally write lifestyle stories, they were looking for these good news stories. People needed a little bit of positivity in their life, because this globally was something that no one had ever been through. And depending on where you lived, it was pretty oppressive. So that discussions internally and about mental health became very, hey, let's check in, let's openly have a discussion. I think within my region, we all gave each other permission to be cranky, but you had to say, I'm in a bad mood. So everything is going to be seen through a black hat lens kind of thing, and just have those practical, caring discussions with teams. And I think to Ku's point, if your staff, if you didn't hear or see them responding, it's to reach out via phone, talk to them. Hey, how are you going? It's a struggle. Some of my staff lived alone, and I was really worried about them. They didn't have even that family social network around them, etc. So that consumer side, safety and security has always been the number one kind of concern we look at in our consumer demand project, especially in Southeast Asia markets. It's number one by a long way, and that just increased even bigger. So where our comms, we were fortunate, is a lot of our comms coming out of our government were actually reflecting about 6 weeks later what Singapore was putting out. So the language was similar. The consumer could understand what was happening in Australia. So that helped us just to say, hey, we're also trying to work our way through this, where our governments were very actively and very publicly sharing information and sharing vaccine supplies, etc. So that gave us a bit of a competitive edge in terms of, okay, we trust Australia's data, where some of the markets, you just didn't trust the numbers coming out of the official governments. They didn't have a clear spokesperson. So yeah, there was a bit of confusion there with the consumers. And it was just, we'll be ready, and then turning into that entertaining and a bit of escapism kind of marketing and testing and learning what worked. So we actually, the simplified Chinese symbols for crisis, the second character, I believe, I don't read Chinese, is opportunity. So we actually went, let's focus on that. What is the opportunity? It comes out. So I can tell our research and our planning side, they really ramped up. But we also saw the opportunity for our travel agents, who were, some of them going and joining food delivery companies to make ends meet. But they were still turning up to our training program. So the Aussie Specialist Training Program was probably the standout engagement platform. And it's created a sense of community of, hey, you know, we've got money with your bosses. We're trying to convince them that as soon as we go, we need you there to actually convert the demand we drive. We've got these key messages we're testing, and we're going to train you on the ones that work.
Did we become more caring as a community?
I like to think so. Yeah, I like to think so. I think adversity brings out the best and worst in people, and the conversations around mental health was, for me, an interesting one from an organisation point of view, where we actually had training to say this is a conversation that can happen, not something you should be embarrassed about. It's we had even informal kind of networks. When we did hybrid events, we made sure the whole team, if we ordered catering from the hotel that we were going to use as the venue, we got lunch boxes delivered to everyone, and then we just sit and have group lunches together via Zoom. It's not the same, but just that interaction, that face-to-face time. And then I think with my management team in the region, it was very much, I want you to every week have a one-on-one conversation with every single team member, not about objectives and tasks. I think the challenge I've seen is we've all become task focused, right? And there's not a lot of cognitive and connection thinking, so silos develop amongst your various divisional teams, etc. But I think that permission to have a conversation and to test and learn, we could put something out and see if it worked. In China, we had a video of a kangaroo scratching itself that went absolutely ballistic in terms of popularity. And then suddenly we had all these celebrities, and they just wanted to have a bit of fun. And I think we needed that as, you know, the circuit breaker of the grind. Just let's have a bit of fun with what we do. Ultimately, I sell fun. It's not the hardest job in the world. But we just need to remember that at time and remind people of it. So I think from that point of view, but also in terms of our supply side, we were really, really happy to see the Australian industry change its direction, its tack. There was a lot of government support, which was a critical role in keeping the industry survive. And so we focus on, you know, your post-COVID body. Everyone did yoga, gym, etc. You know, what's our post-COVID body going to look like for Australia tourism? And it was beautiful when I first got down there, just how many new products had emerged. I mentioned the Indigenous story. New operators had come and wanted to share their culture. We had new systems in place to allow them to link into the organisation through our state and territory partners, and then into us for international. And it's pretty encouraging when you see these new experiences, and the consumer response to them has been really, really positive.
Did the pandemic and the way people were reacting to it and behaving, would it result in more applications, you think, that you could bring to market that would help people should a similar situation arise, or even if on an ongoing basis?
Sure. Maybe I'd like to just cover, some of our platforms. So we have a customer experience platform like Zoho CRM and CRM Plus. So one app that really rose to popularity was the Sales IQ, which is like our chatbot. It's like a chatbot. So when a lot of brick and mortar shops are going into the digital commerce space, and then they're trying to look for to create your own e-commerce site, and they found that, hey, if I put a person at the store can actually converse with any visitors. But if you transit to the e-commerce digital space, your website is just a static website, and you need like a chatbot to even try to interact with the visitors. And then this even led to more maturity in some of our technology, such as Zoho Desk, which is like a ticketing help desk support software. And then we even saw the roles of Zoho Lens, which is like our AR augmented like a help desk app where you actually get to see and do annotations using the mobile phone, because everybody is on the mobile phone nowadays. And if you can do annotations, that will help somebody in the HQ to probably diagnose your problem, or do some maintenance problem, when you are remotely and you have a more junior staff who's on site. Because during the pandemic, essential services will still have to go on, like maintenance of backup power generators, maintenance of essential services like the PUB, the water, the gas, and all of this stuff. So technology really empowers many of these essential services, so that we are able to recover from the early stage of pandemic.
Did you see a big sort of a spike in terms of new demands for your software?
Yes. Generally, I think a lot of businesses are also pushed or encouraged or motivated by not only the pandemic but also by their peers. It's like a businessman A and will talk to businessman B. Hey, are you on board commerce? And why not? It's easy. Sign up now. So when you have a peers and communities of business people moving to the software or going online or studying online, you cannot be too far behind. So as more people embrace digital transformation, more and more small and medium business also follow suit. Yeah.
Okay. So there were positives to be had from this situation, right? Now, do you see that continuing, or do you see it tailing off?
Yes, definitely. Like currently, I don't see software technology as a separate a department or function anymore. It's like previously, even you do nowadays. Even companies do accounting, with software. You do customer support with software. You do delivery with software. You do everything with software generally. So every department that traditional brick and mortar company or store have would have some features or some technology that powers them up. And many small, micro, small and medium enterprises would leverage on this software so that they can punch above their weight.
One of the situations we face is the rising cost of a lot of things. So travel has become very expensive, and has also become an administrative headache because you've got so many procedures and processes put into place now, which people have to jump through all these hoops to eventually get to the fun. How do you see that influencing the desire to travel? And do you see that sort of easing off as time goes by, Brent?
It's a really good question. So with anything from quarantine to borders closed, we just said was a barrier. No one was going to travel for potentially having to quarantine for 2 weeks. Even the first signs of demand, the corporate market came back really fast, and we didn't understand that until we realized, if they do get COVID whilst in destination, their company pays for their quarantining or their isolation. But if as a consumer, that's too big a risk. sometimes you have to step back and go, oh, really, it's not that hard to figure out. But we saw PCR testing and all that as a friction. But the cost, if you think, $120 across a family of 4 to 6, that's a lot of money before you even get on a plane. So those things were a key friction we saw. We knew that would stall demand coming back. And as soon as Australia announced the dropping of pre-testing, we saw sales double overnight. All of our agents reported, yep, people are converting. I think the key one for us in terms of Australia's never been cheap, and we don't market on price. If we did, we'd lose. And it's a value for money proposition, and that's a real key underpinning of the messaging and communication. Australia's diversity of experiences you can do on holidays, the creativity of our tourism operators and the locations there, and just the length of the story we've got to tell. It's a less European story. And more about this culture that we're learning from in terms of our First Nations, how we're managing land, all that. And it just makes it more interesting. So if you've got a family of 6, and we've seen trends in people who had accumulated leave and accumulated savings, so that revenge travel that you mentioned at the beginning is really coming through, where our normal length of stay was 8 days for a holiday before COVID. We're seeing bookings averaging around 14 days. So people are going for that. I deserve a break. We're also unique in Singapore. The country is 45 kilometres wide. It's 24 to 32 degrees every day. So I was saying before, I shipped my 4 kids off to Tasmania, and they're standing out in the cold just to experience being cold, and having a laugh about it. And that's part of the value proposition, that you need to get that whole dimension. I'm a firm believer in that the consumer owns my brand, so I'm quite lucky in this part of the world that Australia has a fairly high perceived level of knowledge, and I just add new elements and new dimensions to create that value proposition even stronger.
Do you see slightly a shift in the kind of consumer or tourist into Australia? I'm not talking about the business tourists, but more the leisure tourists.
Yeah, look, we've seen this trend as each market matures. So across the 4 markets, Indonesia is probably one of the emerging markets. Malaysia and Singapore quite mature. India maturing very, very fast. But you see the change from a ticker box kind of, here's the highlights, here's all the things, to I want to go and discover something new in that mature. So if I look at trends, 54% of people who travel to Australia for leisure or before COVID, self-drove. Now that's just gone through the roof. People want to get in the car. You were talking about it yourself beforehand. Go escape the crowds, go and experience, discover for yourself. You've got safety and security there, good roads, etc. But just go and have that adventure. And so that first wave we saw was the visiting friends and relatives. So relatives was reconnecting, travel for love. Next is the holiday, which we're really seeing from Singapore emerging very strongly now. And it's been open longer than any other market. And the next one we're seeing is, and we think it's starting after these school holidays, is couples. I need to escape my kids. You and I need to reconnect, So we're starting to see that romance and having an adventure together. It's interesting watching these waves. And because Singapore opened in November and the rest of the world pretty much from February this year, what we're learning from Singapore, we're seeing, okay, and now you're about to get into the romance stage, etc. It's quite interesting.
Okay. So do you see this continuing though, or do you see returning to what it was before? Would you be focusing on a more affluent market, or would backpackers and the cheaper sort of travel still be a big factor?
We've always focused on high value travelers. So someone who, you'll have 2 people, same demographic profile, 35. One wants to put into life insurance and the other one wants life experiences. So there's always been that experiential traveler out there. I think you're seeing more people adopting that as, hey, I want to go and do an experiential holiday, not a fly and flop holiday, etc. And that becomes then their new standard of how they travel. But if I look at myself as a consumer, and quite often we forget that there's certain holidays where I just want to go and surf. right? That's my one type of holiday. Then I've got a family holiday when I want to experience things with kids, etc. Whether or not we see a permanent shift, but I think people will categorize. We quite often look at our competitors across the region. Bangkok's famous for eating and shopping and massages, etc. What do we have to offer? It's that diversity of experience. You want a nature, you want a beach holiday, great food everywhere. So that holistic thing that everyone can be satisfied and get something from a holiday. In terms of, is it a permanent shift? I'll be honest with Japan's still pretty much closed because of the frictions involved. China's definitely closed. So I've got a huge competitive advantage and it's unnatural at the moment. So I think my numbers are going to go really high. But then I'm a bit worried about 9 months' time from now, what performance targets I'm going to be set for those. But I think, it sounds really weird as a National Tourism Office to say this, but still the number one determinant of people's demand for a destination is word of mouth. So the more people I can get to go and experience that diversity of Australia and our environment and our sustainability message, the more positive a change for good it is in the future.
Yes, you're right about the slight shift in attitudes is taking place in terms of the desire to want to travel. Cool. You, on the other hand, are encouraging people to stay at home and work from your computers. So how do you see the response to your sort of product in relation to people used to go and do a lot of business travel? Is that being cut back as a result?
Maybe I'd like to state a correction. So, actually,
Okay, please do.
we don't encourage people to stay at home and work, So basically, we enable, people to work anywhere. So, previously before the pandemic, when I go and travel, for some overseas trade show, I would probably spend that 1 hour, 2 hour in the airport, maybe shopping at the DFS or, having a rest. But because of this new habit, and every one of our teammates is, working across APAC. So you are very connected and you have got used to, making calls when you're like stuck in airports. So, we get to make up for all this lost time. Like, for example, if I'm going to spend 2 hours time on the plane to Ho Chi Minh City, I will probably, cover up for this 2 hours flight with maybe the 4 hours time I spend, on the road or, waiting at the airports using some of our tools. So we're actually, gaining back this lost time. And personally, I feel fortunate that, we are not adopting like multiple tools to do different stuff. Like, for example, one cloud storage from one vendor and another email service from another vendor and a project management for, a vendor C or vendor D. And I need to remember so many logins and, yeah. So with Zoho, we just remember one login and, gets access to all of these tools. And I'm able to work at, anywhere. I just came back from Ho Chi Minh City last Sunday. And, I reported back to office on Monday and, there's like no discontinuity of my events. So that's why I want to share. Yeah. It's a personal story. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just add in, Kanan, because that's a segment we're seeing is the bleisure segment, because companies have gone, hey, I didn't lose, or some cases I actually increased productivity with my staff not being in the office. So we're actually seeing people who are combining a work trip and then bringing their family. So this bleisure term is coming out. And as long as you hit your deadlines, you stay engaged, etc., a lot more employees after 2 years of doing this are going, you know what, this is acceptable and it's a value add for my staff about the culture we work in.
I'm sure a lot of landlords won't be happy with that, because if this continues, then businesses will see no reason to have big offices. They will probably want to reduce office size. They might even stop using the office altogether. So you're going to have a lot of empty spaces available, and that, I think, is a cause of concern to the authorities, because property players usually tend to be quite big and have a lot of influence. So do you see that push back coming from governments to private to bring people back into the office?
I think from my point of view, what I saw was worldwide silos developing amongst teams that just sat on the same Zoom calls, etc. We always had a flexible working arrangement. If you needed to, like I traveled and I'd need to come home and spend the day working from home to wash clothes and repack my bag to leave the next day. What I saw was an impact on the culture and the connectivity and that collaboration between teams. And I think you can't replace, especially in Southeast Asia, where so many interactions happen over a shared meal or going to lunch together, that feeling part of something bigger, and the conversations that it then leads to that aren't scripted or put into an agenda and idea generation. I think that companies are doing that. So we've implemented a 3-day must be in the office day. If you're part of a team, your whole team has to be on the same days in the office and out, because there's no point coming into the office and then sitting on a Zoom call with all of your team. So just that flexibility that we have there, because the culture is so important and the values that we set, and you can't plan every little side conversation or aha moment, etc. And people need to interact. And we're a people business, and fundamentally, we try and get people to go on a holiday to meet other people.
Yeah, or your kangaroos or your koalas and stuff like that. That too, yes. Cool. How about your side? Do you see a desire for people who want to come back to work in the office, or are they quite happy to work remotely?
I'll say that we don't have a fixed model, but we have expanded our office unit space. The next time, Kana, maybe you visit us, you'll know that we've taken one more unit by then. So we have expanded the office space to cater for more conducive meeting rooms, and to always offer, some days when, you have a lot of action at home, you want to go to one place that has that type of office infrastructure for you to work. Because nowadays, I don't think, if you spend too much time at home, you may not have the correct infrastructure, like a good desk or a good chair, or maybe some coffee machine, or some nearby. When we meet customers or meet a few different collaborators, the offices are all near CBD. That's where we are located in. So when we are in the CBD, it makes it easy for our employees to even attend gym sessions after work. So because we are not in a lockdown stage, people may be subscribed on some services that are, they need to come to the city, or they're meeting with some friends, for drinks after work, and they'll enjoy coming back because we have like reopened, and when all the action is in the CBD and in all this high intensity tourist area, and tourists are starting to come back, and we even feel that hey, this is like the hype of the city. So these hypes actually give employees the motivation to come back to work.
Can I just get you to put on your crystal ball glasses and tell me what you think the next 5 years will look like in your respective industries? Cool.
I don't have a very good crystal ball, but I get a lot of insights and inputs from our founders and my senior management. So we all know that going digital is the key, and I'll say all the companies will start to get more digitally transformed. And as a software company, we must make our tools even more user friendly, and also provide deeper integrations, and also extending our reach into every single department, no matter how big or small. So it can be a very small component in a company, but it is very just as important to us. So we want to serve like all the functions or all the departments in the organization, because we aspire to become the the software that allows you to run your entire business.
Okay, so would you be introducing new things?
Definitely. So I cannot share too early, but I think in this year, Soho One would have its 5th year anniversary. So I will share with you probably more in our upcoming user conference this year. And maybe prior to that, I can run maybe some roadshows or events so that we can showcase some of our software.
Okay, so you have definite plans in the pipeline. That's cool. Okay, Brent, how about you? 5 years hence.
I think if you think of where a holiday fits in the different person's lifestyle, so it used to be a luxury. Now it's part of my lifestyle. It's my disconnect. It's my mental health break. It's my reconnect with family, that kind of thing. So that the emotional weight that's put on a holiday, I think, is really well entrenched in people's lifestyles. In terms of what kind of experiences, sustainability to me is the key. It's I use the example quite often of the Singapore hiking Facebook group, which had about 15,000 members before COVID and went over to 400,000. People wanted to get out. They wanted to do the walking trails. So for me, that's a really positive thing of tourism, because it provides an impetus for leave that wilderness as wilderness, because it's beautiful in its own right, protects so many species, but tourism can provide an economic lever of why we should do that. So I think you'll see more places being protected because the consumers are being very clear about, I want to come to a pristine place. I want to know that my travel is travel for good and not harming a destination. I think you'll see that experiential traveller who, we saw it out of Singapore with this edutainment, which was a term Chan Brothers coined, where families went together, but they didn't just go to the Sydney Aquarium. They went backstage and met with the aquarists. So there was an educational and learning and understanding where we sit in the part of the world kind of motivation. I think that kind of holiday where even volunteerism, going tree plants, those kind of things are going to come through a lot stronger. But just knowing that what I'm doing is sustainable, I think that's the key buzzword we saw out of Europe, even before COVID, flight shaming. How much is that cost? Of air fuel burn to the environment. So those trends about carbon offsets, doing travelling for good, etc., they will just continue and become more relevant. And I also think people are going to want to go off the beaten path. So one of our key measures is dispersal outside of the gateway cities to get that economic benefit into regional communities. So I think you'll see that increasing. We're already seeing it with the self-drive market as well. And then learning. Australia's got a massive learning journey in terms of our Indigenous cultures. There's a 60,000-year-old culture, the longest surviving culture in the world. And in land management, the bushfires before COVID actually taught us, because you could see these areas that were under Indigenous land management survived the fires exceptionally well. So there's a lot to be learned from that. And I think that's a positive thing in the world, that people are going, hey, maybe just because it's not high tech and from us, there's a lot to be learned. So those cultures are getting proud of their stories, and that's how we keep that culture surviving, and we all become part of it. So I think the world's a better place post-COVID, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I think many will echo that. But on the other hand, while it's good to understand how the Indigenous cultures have prevailed and giving us examples to live by, I think technology is also inserting itself quite heavily into our system, right? So do you use things like machine learning and tools of that nature to try and anticipate trends and see where you could go and what you might want to do?
I think even Expedia came out in the last 6 months saying they've finally got dynamic packaging to the stage where they've been dreaming about it for 20 years. And I think where digitalization is going to help is providing access to consumers who are looking for your product and getting better at that. We obviously, in our marketing and our optimization programs, how do we improve our search? How do we improve natural organic traffic, etc.? But I think it's that access to the information of finding what your special niche or special interest is. That's the key benefit, that we're seeing. And it's just accelerating. Telling that Indigenous story, if we stay on that topic, giving access to people to understand, what the Indigenous story is about. It's actually a map in some cases of how to navigate the lands of these people. It's traditional farming practices, all these kind of things that no one knew 10 years ago and just thought it was a folk story. So I think getting that understanding and that deeper engagement, people read more. We saw in our videos, the click-through rate went through the roof, and the full view rate went through the roof even further. That people they had the time, because they weren't commuting or getting interrupted, to actually stop and pause. And I think that's a good thing for the world. Digital technology is just driving that and accelerating it beyond anyone's expectations.
Cool. At your end, how much of an impact would things like machine learning have in terms of anticipating what your consumer would want in the future?
Yeah, definitely is going to be a very important thing because we understand that AI and all these smart services can only be improved when you have more data and enriched data, and when our services when analytics or stats from all these services can be studied. And of course we also want to do like a survey, like a qualitative ones, so that we can also hear from our customers, so that we can improve on some of our services that we currently offer.
So it's a hybrid
Correct.
solution that you're looking for. Okay.
Correct.
Just a final question before we wrap up the session. It's what do you think the ideal approach should be when it comes to trying to understand the demands and needs of your consumer and what you are able to supply or provide? Should you adopt a safe strategy, or should you adopt a bold, brave strategy? What would be your take on that? Let's start with you, Brent.
I'm going to sit on the fence and say both, because we have, we're a country. Changing that offering is quite different, but we have a core group of attributes that people want, and we have the ability through technology to test and learn. So a lot of our post-COVID marketing, we were focused on conversions. We're more a brand company, but we rely on conversions to actually get the numbers. So we tested and learned even in our virtual travel fleet, which was the best way to design our website, what was the response, how were we delivering speed, fastest path to booking, etc. So there's always opportunities for technology to drive that. And from that process, you sit there and evaluate as a consumer yourself. I'm fortunate that all of my team in the region are, local culture consumers. Do you think this will work? We don't know. Let's test and learn. So we're able to do that. But you have to have the right speed and touch points and data points, to Ku's point, to make sure that you're asking the right questions and learning quickly. And consumers expect that now. That's probably the biggest thing that's come out, that instant response, that instant demand. Customers have very, very high expectations.
So if you increase your speed of response, that means you have very little room for error, right? How do you manage that process?
I think it's a bit easier. People probably give me an easier go because I'm not saving lives, right? I'm selling a good time. And in that sense, it's also customer honesty is the key one. They will catch you out if you lie. So same way, if I get asked a question from a minister, I go, Minister, I don't know, but if it's a good question, I'll go and find out and I'll come back to you. Be really open and transparent with your customer, because as soon as you start trying to pull the wool over or something seen as disingenuous or inauthentic, the consumer has so much speed to tell everyone that it's not the real deal. And it's a big risk that you have to take. So just be honest. I don't know, but I will go and find out.
I'll take brave, definitely, because considering the company's culture and stuff like that. So we are quite a big company, like more than 10,000 staff, working across 19 offices. And the main reason why we are taking the brave or bold method is that we have bootstrap and we have stayed private for over 25 years. So we have as big as an MNC, but we really work as fast and agile like a startup. So many of our products actually, grew leaps and bounds even before the pandemic, and the pandemic actually became another growth pendulum. It gave us a more momentum to grow. And I resonate with what Brent said. Honesty is something that it is like a principle within the company. Things that we do not know, it's okay not to know. But I will not lie to the customer. So that is something that we hold dearly to, and we are not know-it-alls, but we aspire to improve our services to meet the demands of our customers. Yeah, and with this 25 years of track record, we have shown that we remain competent, and I think this year will be another year, good year for us.
Fantastic. Well, I hope it's a good year for both of your organizations and for everything out there. I guess it's always good to bounce back from something stronger as a result. And to both of you, I think the fact that you're falling back and harking back to the old principle of honesty being the best policy, that might really be the way to go ahead. Let people know what the truth is and then just follow that and see where that goes, right?